Okay, great. Let's get started. I'm Lauren Kunze. I run PandoraBots, which is a chatbot development and hosting platform. I will be your moderator today for this retail session, a deep dive into early ROI. Let's start by having our panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Heather Bell. I'm from American Eagle Outfitters, and I work on the innovation team, currently heading up the chatbots program.
Hi, I'm Chris Chapo. I work at Gap Inc., and I help lead our customer data and analytics team for the company.
Good afternoon. I'm Sherif Mityas. I head up our strategy and brand initiatives for the TGI Fridays restaurant chain, of which AI and bots and all things digital fall under.
I'm Andrew Busey. I'm the head of product at Conversable. We're a conversational intelligence platform for companies like TGI Fridays.
Great, thank you, and thank you so much to our audience for coming to listen today. I wanted to start out with a question about what the biggest challenge is in retail today, and specifically your company, and then how your company is thinking about using AI to solve these types of problems in particular.
Sure, I'll take it away. So I think some of our biggest challenges are attracting new customers and staying relevant. So we decided to start experimenting with Facebook Messenger and chatbots. And sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Yeah, no, that was it. How you're using AI
Yeah,
or bots to solve that problem.
So we're also going to start looking into AI as well. We're going to do some experiments with Slice around image recognition and FindMind around AI powering outfitting. So we're very excited to get started on that.
Just kind of building similar sort of story at Gap. I'd say we're really approaching the challenges in kind of two phases. The first being, how do you really remove friction from the buying experience? Because that's a lot of what we've learned is if we can use AI and technology to do that, we can drive significant impact for the business. And then I guess our longer term vision is then how do we create an experience that a customer just loves? Because ultimately we feel like that is how you're going to build loyalty, particularly in this phase of even the story we just heard at the last keynote of, retail is changing in such a different way where it's either convenience or experience. We're really looking towards the future in investing in that space.
What is the biggest point of friction in the buying experience?
That's a good question. I'd say, at least the way we see it, there's probably two big points depending on how you're interacting with us. In the digital space, one of the biggest opportunities is actually finding a product I want. It's discovery. And so that is a huge opportunity for us. In our physical retail space, we have over 3,000 stores, and so we do have a huge opportunity there too, is really around how do we change the model from being a transactional model where someone goes, waits in line and buys, to actually generating an experience for people like, oh, this is awesome. And so for us is how do we actually break the wall and actually put our associates directly in touch with customers and powering that through technology.
Okay, and what about Fridays? Biggest challenges and AI or bot solutions powered by Conversable?
Our biggest challenge, by show of hands, who knows about TGI Fridays? Who's eaten there in the last 12 months? There's our biggest challenge, right? So everyone knows about the brand, but we've lost the engagement on a personal level. People think of us as this big and amorphous chain, but we were originally America's bar and grill. We were your neighborhood bar. We invented the happy hour, the potato skin, right? And so AI really allows us to re-engage with our guests at an individual level. Now the mantra we've been using internally is we're going to stop talking about guests and we're going to talk about individual guests. And what does that mean? And how do we interact? And how do we listen? And so we use bots as just another data point. We understand the engagement we're having with our guests through our partners at Conversable. But we also then take that information and understand what do we feed back? How do we engage differently? Time of day, context, to drive that engagement, to drive that consideration for when an individual is thinking about where, that age-old question, what should we do tonight for food or for a drink? Where should we go tonight, right? Social encounters happen every day between friends, thousands, millions of times on just answering that question. And how does Fridays become part of that conversation? Part of AI helps us drive that going forward.
Anything to add there?
It's great.
Okay, well, yeah, no, but your platform, you work with a lot of retailers if you're solving their specific problems. So for you, when you designed your early experiments, if everybody could, we'll talk about sort of what your initial pilots were. And I also want you to talk about what success looked like for you and what early successes you've seen. So how did, like in your implementation of solutions, how did you insert yourself into that conversation? And how did you define when you had succeeded?
Yeah, we really took a kind of a guest-driven approach, right? So a lot of guests, just in terms of interacting with our social media team or on our 1-800-Fridays, were basic questions like, where's my closest Fridays? Do you have a gluten-free menu? What's the happy hour specials? So really what we started with is just kind of answering basic questions, engaging with guests based on how they wanted to engage with us. And then we also had to do that across platforms, right? Because we don't just have Facebook users or Twitter users, we have users. And so we have to be on multiple platforms, both messaging platforms, social platforms, as well as voice in the future. And then guests kind of said, well, I want to make reservations, and I don't want to have to talk to somebody. And I want to order food, and I don't want to have to talk to somebody. So we start building kind of the capabilities and the learnings to allow our guests to interact with us how they want, how they choose, and where they choose, and when they choose. And for us, that's what really started kind of the crawl, faster crawl. We're not even at walk yet. But that ability to really engage with guests on different platforms for different, really, use cases. And some people just want you to, want to know that Joe, the bartender last night, was a great bartender. And so how do we take that information and do something special for that guest to remind them when Joe's working next, right? So then we become not this TGI Fridays big chain. We become the neighborhood bar and grill where Joe is your favorite bartender. And so that's kind of where we're starting to take it now, really getting use case after use case. Some things work, some things don't, but it's really moving the needle forward.
It's interesting because it sounds like you started out with a service perspective. We get the same questions all the time. Let's provide answers. And it sounds like your customer surprised you in wanting to do more, wanting to make reservations, order food. And I think we had a similar experience with American Eagle Outfitters, who's a client of ours, where we started out assuming right now people use these channels for customer service. But let's find out what else they want to do. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Heather?
Yeah, so our bots, we started pretty broad. We had a little customer service in there, shopping, fitting advice, and we got to see what people were interested in doing. Shop is actually the biggest input, and even manually typed inputs that had a high percentage as well. So we see people consuming all the content, going through all the user flows, and being really interested in interacting with our brand on Messenger. And it's also cool because it's our first experiment with conversational commerce. And the things we learn on the bots, on Messenger, we can take to the site and to our apps as well.
Yeah, it's a good, faster way to test certain things. And then I know, Chris, we were talking about how you've been focused less on new channels, although I know you have some pilots in the pipeline, and more on what little optimizations you can do today on your existing big moneymakers like physical retail and your website. Do you want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah, that's a great point. I'd say one of the things that we've observed with our journeys, we're actually, just to be clear, we're just kind of starting in the last couple years in this space. We've just about a year ago brought together a team, a customer and strategy team, which I'm helping to lead our data analytics portion. And so if we look ahead to where we want to go, is we have all these grand visions that we talked about, but we have a lot of opportunity today to solve problems in that space, particularly around friction removal. So what we've tried to do is we've actually built over the last few months a personalization and recommendation platform, if you will, which is powered by BI, which that will enable us to do a bunch of experiments with. And what's exciting about that is we're not doing fancy things to get started. We're doing little basic things, little things like changing some of the optimization on the website, really basic things that are sometimes driven through AI, but sometimes just driven through an experimentation culture. And those little effects, because we have such scale with 4 brands, have allowed us to really drive meaningful business and business results. And so we focus a lot on the smaller opportunities now, while we have this vision and we're building towards the future.
Okay. Are there any specific numbers or lifts that you can talk about in more detail with regard to small changes on the site?
Yeah, so, we are a publicly traded company, so there's certain things I can't share too much detail, but I can give you an example of the type of things that have led to some fairly meaningful improvements. We actually implemented product recommendations on our website, which most people feel like, well, isn't that so 2000s? We really implemented that with some new technology because we were trying to do it ourselves. We've leveraged third parties, and overnight we saw, upper single-digit improvements in our performance, and that only gets better with additional kind of tuning and testing. And so, one of the mantras or philosophies we've had is that's one example, but we're trying to leverage a bunch of third parties to actually try a bunch of different things. So that's just one example of many that we're working on.
And what about Fridays? Do you have any relatives or hard numbers you can share about your work to date?
Yeah, so we measured, again, kind of our metrics were first engagement, and then, our board likes to hear about real numbers as well. So, from an engagement perspective, as soon as we launched the bots, we launched it on Facebook, we launched it on Twitter, and, kind of a 300% kind of improvement, or I should say increase in just pure engagement on the social sites. So a lot more people engaging with us, talking with us, and then once we turned on things like online ordering and the ability for folks to do that, really just amazing type of numbers that said, okay, we took a segment that said, people are creatures of habit. So there's a family out there that always orders delivery or to go on Wednesday at 6 p.m. because soccer practice is at 6:30, and they got to feed the family before they go to soccer practice. And so once you get into that kind of cadence, and once you're engaging with people, because you know so much more now about that segment and when and how to engage with them. So we started with that segment just reminding them. We didn't even have to throw out a discount code. We just reminded them that, would you like your order again, at 46 minutes before they ordered last week at that same day. We found 46 minutes, for whatever reason, 46 minutes, 70% click-through rate. Of the 70% that clicked through, half ordered again.
That's amazing.
It was stunning, right? And again, this was one segment, right? So think about a very micro segment. But as you start thinking about, okay, well, there's lots of micro segments. What are those triggers to be part of that consideration set? What are those triggers that allows people to think about you when they're, again, wondering what to do for dinner or drink tonight? That's really the power of AI, right? Because there's no way we could, just the amount of data flowing to us, right? We have 500 million transactions in our restaurants. We have millions of interactions on social media and our website and our app every month. Just being able to collect that data, much less do something with it, is really where we're, in our opinion, kind of the humble beginnings of AI is really starting to show some value.
On the personalization front, do you mention the soccer practice?
We've not gotten that far yet,
Okay,
but we
I
do
imagine
know
that might be creepy.
that's a little creepy. But we do know that they ordered that specific salad and that how they altered it, right? So some people didn't like pecans. We already ensure that salad doesn't have pecans when it's in their checkout cart.
And for the 46 minutes, did you A/B test a bunch of different times or methods for reaching out?
The heck out of it, yes.
Wow.
So we tried different, not just minutes, but you try different kind of phrasing. You try different platforms. How you talk to someone on Twitter has got to be different than Facebook. And so it's really just a lot of trial and error. Some things work, some things don't. But once you find that hook, it's pretty miraculous, kind of the impact.
Yeah, and I think that's a good takeaway for anyone who's thinking about trying this. Is it really is a lot of experimentation and iteration and persistence to unlock that. But once you do, it can be incredibly powerful. And then American Eagle, do you want to talk about some of your relative performance relative to other channels and sort of how you're thinking about how this can outstrip channels in the future?
Yeah, so first we wanted to see if customers were even interested in speaking to us on Messenger. We also did some early experiments on Kik, and we saw compared to app downloads, it was really favorable, and we were actually outpacing the amount of social media followers we had at double the rate monthly, which was great. So we were getting users in the hundreds of thousands on Messenger. And now that we have these users, I think we need to start looking towards broadcast messaging and remarketing and just starting to get really deep into personalization through AI and start experimenting there.
Yeah, because I think we see the open rates and click-through rates are really high on a messaging channel, which sounds like you're seeing as well. I wanted to ask a question about the different channels. You mentioned Twitter and Facebook being different. Do you see advantages to the different platforms you're on? I know you're moving into voice as well. If you want to talk a little bit about what's driving that decision.
Sure. I mean, again, from our perspective, it's kind of everyone who has a stomach is a potential guest, right? So, unfortunately, no one is on just one platform, right? So, and food, rightly or wrongly, is some of the most kind of photographed, talked about things on social platforms, right? Instagram is kind of food porn. And, you know, as you start thinking about, just talking to Andrew yesterday, I was at an In-N-Out Burger and I was at a Michelin-starred restaurant yesterday. And in both restaurants, there was more flash bulbs going off of the food than people like doing other things on their phone, right? People are taking photos. And so understanding who does what on each platform is important for us. And so how we interact with someone on Facebook is very different. We use more emojis on Twitter. You know, it's just the language is different on the platforms. And then voice, I think, is really going to be interesting, but a huge challenge, right? Because when people are typing, it's usually, from an efficiency perspective, very transactional. When you're speaking, when we talk to each other, I mean, I can go off and start talking about the weather. I can tell you a joke in between ordering. I mean, I want to do lots of different things. It's how I talk. Being able to really capture what's relevant and have a conversation that's meaningful for a guest when you're using voice, I think is going to be interesting for us. We're going to have to start, again, really crawl, walk, run. But it really, I think, opens up more opportunities for us to understand who the guest really is, what frame of mind he or she is in, what are they looking for, other than I just want a burger with no tomatoes and ketchup. And, you know, you get that from type. Voice, I think, opens up a whole nother realm. In fact, we're going to be announcing something soon with a car manufacturer. We're going to be inside cars. So people are going to be able to reserve their table on their way to their local Fridays. And at a certain point have their favorite drink waiting for them at the table. And so it's how do you, again, engage differently when people are talking to you, I think is, to us, really untapped, enormous, but complex potential.
This is a question for Andrew. Just largely speaking, how do you feel that bots and AI are poised to be most disruptive in the e-commerce and retail space?
So I think we're in the early days still, obviously, but I think that there's a real opportunity for something beyond bots, an automated experience or some type of conversational intelligence where, I mean, I'm surprised still we talk to people who are, you know, have inbounded us from very big brands who have heard they're supposed to get a bot, but they don't really know what that means. Like they've never used a Facebook Messenger bot and they don't understand the richness of the experience that can be delivered there. You can really almost deconstruct a mobile app and put it into Messenger with a bunch, which gives you a bunch of advantages, and like you don't have to download it and remember to use it. So we think that there's going to be we're at the early days of a revolution that replaces apps or augments apps with these other experiences on all these other platforms.
And this is a question for everybody with a bot. How do you acquire bot users? How do you market this new service? Because I think one thing that we're hearing a lot is, oh, you know, you don't have to download this. Your audience is the 1.3 billion people that are on Messenger. But we see people, particularly smaller indie developers on our platform, who launch and then nothing happens and you spend all this time building and nobody's talking to it because they don't know about it. So how do you guys get the word out when you're going onto a new channel that you have this new way to interact with the brand?
So this comes up all the time with us. I think part of it is that you're going to get what you put into it out of it, both in terms of how much time you spend designing and developing your automated experiences on all these different platforms. And you're also going to have the same issue. You know, you could go hire the best mobile development studio in the world, spend $2 million making an amazing mobile app, put it in the App Store, and don't tell anyone about it. Guess what? No one's going to download it. The same is true of all sorts of, you know, chatbots and other automated experiences. If you don't tell people about it, they're not going to use it. So you still have to think about how you're going to market it, how you're going to get those customers to engage with it the first time. Once you have them engaged the first time, there are opportunities to keep them re-engaged, but you still have to spend some marketing effort, whether that's in-store or some other type of outreach or paid ads like you would market anything else. You still have to put the marketing effort into it.
And is that a concern for you, bringing all of this transactional capability onto these third-party channels, that one day you're going to be paying more to have these conversations with the customers?
I don't think so, because I think to Andrew's point, again, the migration from I see a world not too far away where we're not going to have a Fridays app. In fact, we may not even have a Fridays website because people are not going to individual sites in the future. They're going to be talking to things, and they're just going to expect someone to answer, regardless of whether they're ordering, a great new swimsuit from American Eagle or a shirt from Gap or ribs. They're going to want to talk to a device or talk to their car or talk to something, and it's just going to get it for them. Versus, well, I have to go to that app to get that, and that app to get that, and that app to get that. I think those days are numbered. And so regardless of what the cost is, I think it's going to be the price of entry to conduct business in the future.
For Gap, I want to talk a little bit more about the physical retail environment, because that's still a huge thing, and I think that's really the last step in the physical funnel. Once somebody's in your store, they're probably buying something, and that's probably still more powerful than any of these digital channels. So can you talk about how you're trying to bring people into the stores and what you're doing to improve that in-store experience?
Great, yeah. So I think one of the, I'll give you a couple of things that we think about and then how we're approaching it. Most people don't realize that many people actually, I think it's close to 70 to 80% of customers actually start their purchase experience outside of a store. And so they really are searching and looking at things online before they even come to one of our stores. And so with that sort of impetus, as we realize, okay, she's crossing the lease line, she's coming into our stores, what are the things, if we already know what she's trying to do what she's looking at before she comes into the store, if we can leverage that when she arrives, what are the things that we can contemplate doing for her? Great example of something we've contemplated and begin to do some experiments with is, well, imagine that I want to buy these, this is a sales pitch, these brand new Traveler's Chinos from Banana Republic, and I was looking online for that. Remind me when I get in the store, do wayfinding so I can actually find the product, know that I'm coming in, begin to know my size and my style fit, and actually begin to have that product be brought out to the floor, because a lot of our product is back of house. So it's those types of experiences to remove friction that we're beginning to think about of completing the last mile. A lot of people talk about, the, creating a really personalized selling experience from an agent. We'll probably get there, but we're starting with some of the more basic friction points.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up and ask, are there unique challenges to maintaining that customer identity from the website to actual physical in-store, or do you have a good solution for doing that?
That's a huge challenge that we have not solved, and if anyone has solved it, I'd love to learn. But I think the way we're approaching it is, if we can get someone to engage, and similar to the idea of getting to engage with the bots in the channels, if we can tell them about this great new feature, that's our belief that we can at least get that engagement going. We're also investing a lot in our all of our applications, so our native apps, to re-engineer them for a platform to enable us to do these technologies as well.
So do you completely disagree with Fridays, that one day you will never have an app or a website?
That's
interesting. It's a different sector.
Yeah,
obviously.
It was interesting. When Sherif said that, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting point. For us, we will need to be involved, similar to everyone, in the channels where our customers are. And so for us, yes, we will be in all these new channels, but we still imagine certain scenarios where you can create a community, you can create an experience, you can create, particularly for us, ways to manage your things like your credit card program and your loyalty points, that until those platforms exist elsewhere, we'll probably still need our own way to express that. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a branding element to having your own channels as well. That's important.
There definitely is, and this is one of the challenges we face more in a central team to help drive innovation. Is in particularly a company which has a storied history of 40, 50 years, we do have a lot of brand marketers and belief that this needs to really tell the brand story. But we're trying to say, how do you tell that story, but in a way that a customer can actually interact with and purchase, if you will, and actually create a great experience. And that's one of our challenges we face.
Okay, great. My last question for everyone before we open it up to audience questions was, do you have a 5-year AI plan? And I think most people on this panel do. It'd be great to hear, how long-term is your thinking, what's driving the investment, and what sort of teams are you putting together to really take you there so your business is ready to meet this huge shift in consumer behavior?
Certainly, you go ahead.
Yeah, so we clearly have a long-term plan. For us, this again is infancy time, right? I mean, this is truly crawling, and so, but there's a true north, right? We kind of all, I think, understand where we want to end up. In certain cases, the technology is not there yet, but given the rate of change and the partners we work with, and seeing again kind of the roadmaps that our partners are on, we believe there's a path of really getting and unlocking the value, as I mentioned, of how does AI really going to affect us from a customer service, from a transactional, from an engagement perspective, from a learning, becoming more of a learning organization, understanding true individual guest needs. I think the opportunity in terms of really understanding when I know that mom is going to a soccer practice and what else I can do, not only with that mom, but her circle of friends when they go to, have a wine on a Tuesday night. Kind of how do you start to extend in terms of the social networks, in terms of the friends of the friends. There's so much more that we can be doing, but it's, we've just got to, A/B test the hell out of this thing right now, see what works. There's a lot of stuff that's not, and move forward. But yeah, we have teams that are focused on all the different pieces, and this is not, this age of thinking that this is going to replace humans. Not the case. I mean, we still have a social media team that interacts with guests, even though there's the bot. We have customer service people that still interact. We have product people. So this makes, in my mind, our team smarter and allows them to work on higher valued activities. And so, to me, the plan is how do you continue to leverage the ability and technology to, I think Tony said in the keynote, how do you think about doing technology to solve problems versus because it's cool and because it's it's interesting to talk about. That doesn't solve a guest need. It's got to solve a guest need, make someone's life easier. The guest, our team members, kind of moving forward to make sense.
Yeah, so we had started the bot program last holiday, just a pilot, short term, see how it does. It was so promising, we decided to extend it through this year. It still is very much like pilot mode, but we definitely believe conversational commerce is here to stay, but it's how do you unlock that and how do you drive the conversion, which is where we're continuing to focus on. And now bringing in AI, and again, using this platform as a way to test these things and take them across the company to our other properties.
I think similar to the story Sherif mentioned, one of the things we really believe is our mission, what we're trying to do is to create the best consumer experience in our industry. And oh, by the way, technology and AI will help us do that. That's kind of our philosophy. But it really starts with what are the problems we're trying to solve for our customers? How do we leverage this stuff to do it? Where we are in the journey from a 5-year perspective, as I mentioned, just about a year ago, we began to bring together teams, data and analytics, digital experience, or actually a global consumer payments program, which is our loyalty program, onto one group that on behalf of the company we're leading the charge to actually transform us. And so a lot of that transformation is building kind of the foundational technical capabilities, but more importantly, we're actually building muscle in the business. So we're actually embedding folks in different groups to help them think digitally, because most of our brands, they're not used to thinking that way. They're used to brick and mortar stores. And so we're having to build the technology, but then figure out how to activate it within the brands.
Okay, well, I think we'll open it up to questions from the audience. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'll repeat the question. Okay, so I think the summary of the question was a lot of these AI experiences are very transactional, which is opening up the store to be increasingly experience driven and more of a showroom, and mentioning bonobos. How do the retailers think about that?
I mean, I think that's exactly right, future-wise. But right now, our stores are still incredibly important. You see in places where you have a store, the online business is better. So it's just figuring out how those two things go hand in hand. And just knowing the customer, what they're doing online. If you know that when they're in store, you have remarketing opportunities. So it's really connecting the dots.
Yeah, that's a question we haven't solved, obviously. One of the things that just to give an example of how we're thinking about that, particularly for some of our brands like Athleta, which is a pretty, it's a more of a high-touch service model, is how do we actually create experiences in the store that aren't just transactional experiences? And then begin to build communities. Like, great example, like let's have and this sounds kind of cheesy, but let's have a group together to do yoga in the store. And then they begin to build a community together, and then now I become connected to the yoga instructor, to the person who was with me in the store when we experienced this, and then bringing that into the digital space is kind of examples of what we're doing. Then how do we use AI to expand that is a good question that we're contemplating as well.
Okay, yeah, that sounds really similar to Fridays and trying to embed in sort of the social, communal aspects. Very interesting. Question in the back, yeah. Yes. Okay, yeah, so this question is about hardware. We've spoken a lot about software today. Is anybody doing anything with kiosks, self-service checkout, robots that go around the store, robots that bring you your food when you're in Fridays? Anybody?
We're one of our brands, Old Navy, which is one of our big brands. You may know is one of the big pain points for customers in that store is price clarity, because we do a lot of discounting and promotional pricing, and long lines, because it's a pretty transactional business. So as simple as this sounds, this is not AI based, but we started putting price checkers in those stores where we noticed we had longer line lengths, where we had more of that confusion, and we actually noticed our net promoter scores go up significantly, and actually the revenue in those stores went up as well. And so that's an example of a technology. It's not fancy, but it's those little things that really can have a big impact for us.
Yeah, we've done some experimenting. So about creating a store experience, we had recently brought in printers to print T-shirts, customized T-shirts in stores, and we're seeing some early success with that, and it just creates a really fun experience.
We're shouldn't talk about it yet, but we're we're testing out a very cool interactive bar top. So imagine being able to create a drink like on a huge iPad touchscreen that happens to be the bar top, and then swiping it and sending it to a pretty girl at the end of the bar. So there's lots we can do. We're a social, fun brand to have fun at the bar by bringing in some of these kind of new digital things to play, which people are just used to doing, right? Just playing around on their iPad. You're sitting in front of a bar.
Yeah, and it'd be great if you could send it to a cute girl who's not in the bar, and then she comes to the bar to collect the drink.
That could work.
Right, and your payment is handled.
That really could work.
Through
I like it.
Messenger?
That's new. Thank you.
All
All right.
No, feel free to take that. I think you had your hand up. Yeah.
My question is specifically about trying to discover using versus someone coming in, doing exactly what they want, versus someone saying, I'm going out for dinner, suggest me something to wear for the evening, that kind of stuff. Right there.
Could you clarify the question a little bit?
The alternative would be, I'm looking for a particular plain jacket versus I'm going out for dinner, suggest me something. Right? So using a bot, that's what I would talk to a salesperson on the floor.
Okay, so I think the question is, what's the difference between somebody who's coming into the experience knowing what they want versus somebody who doesn't know what they want, and how do you engage with that person? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think chatbots can kind of make that discovery process a lot more fun than a site is like a lot of work. You've got to click here, click there to get to what you want. But the goal with our chatbots is to inject AI in a way that's knowing what your intent is at that moment and serving up products that you want to see to really kind of shorten that funnel. We are going to. We're going to do a pilot with Find Mine, which powers outfitting. So we'll see. I'm very excited to see how it goes.
We did a little tiny piece around that, which was, if you remember, about a month or so ago in New York, they had a week where it was like 90-some degrees. And so for the responses that when people were searching for drinks or things like that, we, instead of just kind of all the different drinks, we highlighted specific kind of summer frozen drinks. It's just in those markets where the temperatures were blazing. And again, not just because of what those people had bought before, but because of where they were and the temperature outside. And we saw some pretty interesting kind of click-through on that as well, because again, we were tailoring the recommendations, not just based on who you were, but your environment as well. So those are the types of things you can really start playing around with, not just, again, kind of first-party data, as we were talking about before, but really everything from an environmental perspective.
Great. We have time for one more question. You in the back there. Sorry to everyone. Okay, the question was, is anyone using AR or VR in the retail experience?
We actually had a pilot that we've launched with a Gap app with a company called Metrics, where we're actually doing some So we're doing some VR on particularly for the Gap brand. I think the intent of it was, and this is a problem I hear often from our customers, is there's this thing online and typically it's a flat product. How does it look on me? I'd say, and that's one of the areas that we continue to want to explore. How do we continue to do that in a more scalable way, and more to come.
Yeah, I've been dreaming of that clueless closet since
Exactly.
the 90s,
Yes.
where you just
We all
get to
have.
go through and it shows you what it looks like on you. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you so much to everyone for being here. Thank you so much to our panelists. Great job.